Mother said, "What are you going to do now?" Implying I'd wasted all this time being educated. It was about time I got a proper job. And I would reply, not only to her but to my aunts and so on, "Well, I'm a chemist now, so I can go and serve behind the counter in Boots." I've never got around to that somehow. But I thought, and this was my first mistake, no, probably not my first, but one of my first big mistakes, I thought, I'm a chemist, I'm a scientist, I've got to do science. I owe it to science, all right? So I went ahead and did a doctorate. Well, I was invited to go and do a doctorate. And it was wonderful fun. Don't get me wrong, I had a great time. It wasn't a bad doctorate. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then I went on and did postdoctoral research, because that's what you do, and I wanted to be an academic chemist. That was in Canada, and I came back here, and I couldn't get a job. There'd been a baby boom in the late 60s, and in the early 70s, everything was contracting, and nobody wanted any more young, thrusting lecturers. And I couldn't find a job. And by this time I was married and I had 2 kids and we were living in a 1-bedroom flat and I had a rotten grant, and I just thought, I'm not sure why I'm doing this. And so I dropped out. And I dropped out into publishing, and for 5 years I edited science books. And that was good fun. I enjoyed that. And I learned a lot of science, because suddenly I wasn't just doing organometallic chemistry, I was also doing the whole of chemistry, I was doing ecology, I was doing the brain, I was doing all sorts of things and learning a great deal. And it's great fun learning. When you're not forced to, when you don't have exams at the end of the term, it's terrific fun. And so I enjoyed that, but I got bored by the OUP. It's a very big, slow animal. And eventually I decided I needed to move, and I couldn't think where to go. And I applied for all sorts of jobs, like Chief Exec of the Shetland Islands Council. I think I'm glad I didn't get that one. And then I'd had lunch with a couple of chaps from Yorkshire Television, and one of them turned up an hour late. And the other one turned up 2 hours late wearing a full-length fur coat. He'd just got off a plane from Moscow. And I thought I could work with these people. Yeah. They're sufficiently mad, it might be fun. And so I rang them up and said, could I have a job? And they said, are you serious? And I said, yes. And they said, okay. And I became a researcher at Yorkshire Television. And as Professor Mann said, I was a researcher for 6 years and a producer for 11 years, and it was all right. Again, I did reasonably well, and some of my programs were successful and so on. But during that time, I took a decision. I decided I was never going to be very well paid in television, and contrary to most people's expectations, most people in telly aren't very well paid. It's all right, but you don't earn a fortune. And I thought I ought to do something about my retirement when I was old, and my solution was to try and earn royalties. And so I began writing books and taking photographs. And I've been doing that ever since. This was a conscious decision, one of the few sort of sensible decisions I've taken in my life. And I've written about 20 books now, and taken, I don't know, 200,000 photographs, a lot of photographs anyway. And they generate money. And the nice thing is that the money keeps on coming in. One of my latest books, Talking Science, I've just heard yesterday is being translated into Japanese. Wonderful. Cash will roll in. I don't have to do anything. I'll get a copy eventually in Japanese, which I won't read, but I'll admire and put on my shelves. And the thing is that royalties go on and on coming. So if you can see a way of earning some money without actually doing any work, or with doing work that you enjoy, do it. Don't think you've got to be constrained to be a chemist because you've just got a degree in chemistry. Carry on and do what you want to do. So that was a conscious decision, and as I say, both writing and photography now bring me quite a reasonable income. I could probably survive on either of them if I had to. And that's great fun. And I love writing. Oh, well, I love photography too. I've taken 100 pictures in the last week, and they're high-powered, they're high-grade pictures. I take them with a lot of care and so on. So that was my first decision. And all the time I was producing, I actually secretly wanted to do a bit of presenting, to get in front of the camera. But my boss said, oh, you don't want to do that. Waste of time. You'll spend all your time with a hairdresser. You can see that, actually. I'm beautifully groomed. But anyway, so I sort of went along with what he said. But then there was pure chance stepped in. I was 50. Well, just about 50. It was the 7th of August, 1990. No, I was 47. 7th of August, 1990. I'd been playing squash. I love playing squash, but fat old men die on the squash court. And I thought I'd better do something else to get some exercise. And I decided to buy one of these newfangled mountain bikes because I reckoned I could ride into work. I was living 12 miles outside Leeds. I could ride into work 2 or 3 days a week and get fit and thin and lean and sexy like those guys in bike shops. You'll see it hasn't had any effect at all. Anyway, I went and bought a mountain bike. And I rode into work the next day, and as I say, it was 12 miles, and there are 3 serious hills between where I lived and where I worked. And I arrived purple in the face, and I leant my bike against the desk and lay on the floor for an hour or 2. And my boss said, "What the hell do you think you're doing?" And I explained. And he said, "Well, you better go and do something useful with your bike. Go and find some local scientists or something." So I ignored him, as usual. But about a week later, I was exploring the routes. Now, I don't know if any of you ride bikes, but if you've got to ride from A to B, you actually invest quite a lot of time in working out which are the least bad hills between A and B. It's not obvious. You look at them, and sometimes a short, steep one is better than a long, slow one. So there were about 15 different routes between my home and the office. And I was struggling up the long hill between Birstall and Driglington. I expect you know it. And it's about 2 miles long, and about halfway up, I suddenly saw a blue plaque on a house on my right, and any excuse to stop on a hill. So I stopped and read it, and that was where Joseph Priestley was born. So when I got to the office, I looked him up, and I found that when he was 9 years old, his mum died, and he had to go and live with an aunt in the Old Hall in Heckmondwike, which was my local pub. Serves Sam Smith's beer and very good sandwiches, if ever you're there. And Priestley later went to live in Leeds and discovered oxygen as a result of watching the beer brewing in a brewery next door to where he lived. And so we thought, hey, hang on a sec, here's a farmhouse, a pub, and a brewery, all on one bike ride, and the man who discovered oxygen. There's got to be something here. And so we looked around a bit more, and we found some more people like this. And we decided to make a series called Local Heroes, and that was where it started. So my life was changed literally by a mountain bike and a chance bike ride. You know, if that house had been 50 yards off the road, I wouldn't have seen the blue plaque. I might never have become a presenter. So I became a presenter by mistake, really. So I dropped out of academic life into publishing. I dropped out of publishing into television. I dropped out of production into presenting. I'm a triple dropout. And you see now I've got no job. I'm all alone. I'm miserable. But it's been a very good life. So I just want to sort of suggest 1 or 2 things. I don't want to bore you. One other thing I was asked to tell you about was this suit I'm wearing, which is very slightly unusual. It's hand embroidered so you can't hear. It's hand embroidered in India. I met a lady who's a Sikh, an English Sikh, but she gets these clothes made in India, not in sweatshops but by people who are paid real money. I know, I paid it. And these swirly bits are meant to be either harmonograms or planetary orbits, and they're all hand embroidered. I think it's wonderful, but some people think, well, it does clash a bit with this. Well, anyway. So, when your grandmother says to you, "What are you going to do now?" the first answer is, "I don't know." Some of you may have decided you want to be doctors or vets or engine drivers or whatever it is. That's fine. If you have a dream, pursue it, that's great. But I'm sure a lot of you won't have decided because it's very difficult. It isn't obvious where you go from any particular position or any particular degree. And as far as I can tell, it's impossible to find out what's in a job until you're doing it. So people would say, how would you like to be a chartered accountant? Or how would you like to be a quantity surveyor? I haven't a clue. I don't know what that means. What I do know, actually, because I've filmed a bit, I can tell you that the most important bit of equipment for a quantity surveyor is a pair of good wellies, because you spend most of your time in mud, and if you don't have wellies, you're in terrible trouble. But anyway, apart from that, I still don't know what the job is like. So don't think you've got to make up your minds now, but if opportunities come along, grab them. If men get off planes from Moscow wearing full-length fur coats, listen to them, or ignore them, whichever you think is correct. If you decide to buy a mountain bike and you go past a blue plaque on a wall, follow your dream. It may turn out to be wonderful. It may turn out to be a disaster, but it may turn out to be wonderful. For me, it's absolutely wonderful because I'm just doing all sorts of wonderfully scatty things. As Professor Mann said, I'm about to present a huge series on the ancients, the science and technology of the ancients. We decided, unfortunately, it was so long that I couldn't film in all these different places, so I have 3 assistants, 2 female, 1 male assistant, and they got to film in China, India, Egypt, Greece, Syria, Bahrain, Rome, Peru, Mexico. I got 1 day on Orkney. So sometimes I get the short straw. But I did get to see the oldest lavatories in the world, which are at Skara Brae on the west coast of the mainland of Orkney. Wonderful for me, very, very exciting. I'm very interested in lavatories, and seeing the oldest ones in the world was a real treat. I would have liked to go to China and Peru, but I don't care. That's all right. But also, all sorts of other things keep happening to me. Last Tuesday evening, I was at the Dimbleby lecture given by James Dyson, who invented the bagless vacuum cleaner, and there was Trevor Bayliss and a whole lot of old friends, and I got to meet the new chairman of the BBC. We had dinner. It was very pleasant. The next day, I was at a posh lunch launching a new maths initiative, and who should I be introduced to but a bloke called Charles Clarke, who now seems to be rather important. He will have forgotten me, it doesn't matter. 3 weeks ago, I went to a fabulous party celebrating British design at Buckingham Palace. It was wonderful. I met the Queen for a few minutes, but actually, she was the least interesting person there. I know I shouldn't say that. But there were 500 designers, the most amazing people. There was a woman who made lovely ceramic pots by putting wet plaster of Paris into a balloon and waving it round her head, letting it set, then taking the balloon off and using that shape to make a funny-shaped pot. There was the man who invented the idea of freezing the ground under Boston so they could drive enormous tunnels through to put all the highways underneath the railway lines while the railways were still running, simply by freezing the ground. There was a woman who was designing a new public transport system for Accra in Ghana, and so on and so forth. Everyone I talked to just had these extraordinary tales to tell, and I feel really privileged because I'm just a TV hack. I'm a triple dropout. So here is a piece of advice. Apart from putting off your granny, try and find out what you really enjoy doing. I really enjoy telling stories, and now I get paid to do it. So try and find out what you really enjoy doing, and then find someone to pay you to do it. And all I can say apart from that is congratulations on all those degrees, and good luck.
Will all our graduands please rise? In the name and by the authority of the University, I confer on you and those whose names appear on the graduation lists the degrees to which you are entitled, and for which you who are present will be individually presented by the Dean of your faculty. Please be seated.
Vice-Chancellor, I present to you candidates for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy in the Faculty of Humanities. Christopher Neil Alexander. Avril Joan Buchanan. David John Stuart Coleman. Gordon Brendan D. Lapp. Carolyn Angela Jess. Sarah Craig Lanier. Adam Richard Marshall. Vice-Chancellor, I present to you candidates for the degree of Master of Arts by examination in Ancient History. Siobhan McQuaid. William Odling Smee. In Anthropology of Music, Colin Kenny. In Byzantine Studies and Modern Greek, Catherine Burns. In Classics and Ancient History, Aaron Joseph Alexander Brown. In composition, Margaret Mary Mackay. Heather Natasha Wright. In drama, Marion Mary Elizabeth Fitzpatrick. And for the same degree in English, creative writing with distinction, Carol Margaret McGrath. John McGuckian. And with pass, Georgina Louise Hambleton. Rosalind Elizabeth Hazlitt. And in English, Irish writing with distinction, Catherine McQuaid. Aisling Teresa Mullen. And with pass, Aisling Ann Campbell. Caroline McGuinness. Thomas Louis Munzer. Fergal O'Prey. Graham Simon Press. And in English Medieval Studies with distinction, David Roberts. And with pass, David Falls. Joanna Clare Hall. Claire Marie Kelly. And in English, Modern Literary Studies with distinction, Elizabeth Ann Largy. Stephen Mullen. And with pass, Amber Louise Boyd. Sinead Marie Caslin. Peter Anthony Curran. Anna May Dillon. Lindsay Pinkerton. And in English, Reconceiving the Renaissance, Literatures, Places, Cultures with distinction, Adele Victoria Lee. Georgina Sarah Lee. And with pass, Sinead Larkin. Laura Taylor. Gigi Wong. And for the same degree in film studies, cinema, modernism with distinction, Lavinia Elizabeth Bryden. And with pass, Helen Lucy Warner. In Hispanic studies, Christine Hall. In Irish history with distinction, Jennifer Mooring Reagan. Andrew Scholes. And with pass, Catherine Margaret Brannigan. Arlene Elizabeth Emma Edgar. Michelle Maria Griffin. Jonathan Alexander Harris. And in Irish studies, Fionnuala McAllister Hannah. Bernard McCaughey. Patrick James McCormick. Eileen Mary Patricia McMahon. Derinell Mairead Warner. For the same degree in music technology with distinction, Kenneth Ian Brown. Nicholas Crowe. Michael Rogers. Chui Chui Tan. And with pass, Craig David Jackson. Christine McComb. Philip Noel George Strain. Connor Tracy. For the same degree in philosophy with distinction, Stephen Rainey. And in scholastic philosophy with pass, Vincent Patrick Cushnahan. Martin Malone. And for the same degree in social anthropology, environment and culture with distinction, Elena Jane Rowley. And in social anthropology, New Frontiers, Helen Mary Donnelly. Vice-Chancellor, I present to you candidates for the degree of Bachelor of Arts, single honours schools, with second-class honours, First Division, Alexandra Louise Boyd. Mark Drennan. Nathan Elliott. William Hart. David Robert Loudon. Michael Allen John McBroom. Linda McBurney. Matthew McCoy. Ursula Denise Toland. With second-class honours, second division, Dara Henderson. Neil McArdle. And for the same degree, joint honours school, single classification, with second-class honours, second division, Luke Edward Allen Pratt. With third-class honours, Anne-Marie Teresa Kelly. And for the same degree, major minor honours schools, with second-class honours, second division, Carol Stewart. For the same degree, combined honours with second-class honours, second division, Sarah Burton. Vice-Chancellor, I present to you candidates for the